wanted to talk about holidays because I don't know about you, but I love holidays and I have great childhood memories of holidays. As a kid, probably my favorite holiday was Christmas. And I remember we would take the Amtrak train from our little hometown to Illinois, and I'd get to see my grandparents and my cousins, and probably it's a toss-up, which was my favorite, either presents or grandma's sugar cookies. I'm not sure which one it was, because my grandma made the best sugar cookies in the whole world, I must say. And at Thanksgiving, I remember we always stayed home for Thanksgiving. I remember eating my mom's pie and then kind of spreading out all the advertisements and trying to convince my parents that we should get up early the next morning and drive 2 hours to the nearest mall. That's back when Black Friday was still on Black Friday. And at Easter, I remember my mom would always buy me a new Easter dress. I remember wanting a pink dress. And she said, "Oh no, pink is not a redhead's color. A green dress it shall be, and some things never change." At Easter, I remember too eating lots of marshmallow peeps and robin eggs and getting a package from Grandma in the mail with homemade peanut butter chocolate eggs. And these are some of the great memories I have. And on this holiday, Memorial Day, I grew up in a town without an indoor swimming pool. So this was the first day of summer, the first day that the pool would be open, where I pretty much spent my entire summer. So it was a very exciting weekend. And maybe you notice a few things about my holiday memories. Besides their extensive focus on food, these were things that were important to my family and things that were a regular part of our lives. And now that I'm grown up and I've looked back on these holidays memories, I've tried to continue some of those in our family, and we've also implemented some new things for things that are important to us as well. So today, on this Memorial Day weekend, I just want to take a moment to honor those who have served our countries in our armed forces. So together, we want to say thank you to anyone who has served or is serving in the armed forces. If you could please stand. We appreciate your service and know that there's no way that we can truly thank you, but we do thank you for it. So we have holidays to remember and celebrate important things. The service of those in our military is a great reason for a holiday. Otherwise, we might forget. And last week, we celebrated communion, so we can remember the sacrifice of Jesus and what that means to each of us. That's another thing that we don't want to forget. But there are a few things that we like to forget, like the fact that according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, 1 in 9 people in our world goes to bed hungry each night. Or that in the 3 minutes since I started speaking, 5 people have died from a water-related illness. Or that according to the International Justice Mission, right now in our world, 32 million people are living in slavery. That's 1 out of about every 250 people on this planet. One of those people has a name. Her name is Abigail. And Abigail's story starts in a place that's familiar to all of us, a coffee shop. She went there that day, excited to meet a new friend. And as she arrived, her friend was already seated. She ordered her drink and she sat down, and they had a great conversation. It felt like they had known each other for years. Little did she know, that man had put something in her drink that would change her life forever. The next thing she knew, she woke up with a searing headache, and she was in a dark and ominous room. She watched in dread as men came into that dark room to beat and take advantage of her. For days, this went on, was all she knew. She was not given any food, and she lost count of how many men came to abuse her. She was beyond the point of exhaustion, and she was so emotionally drained that she no longer found the will to resist this abuse. Abigail was sold by an individual she considered a friend. This was the part that she could not wrap her mind around, how that was even possible. And she couldn't find her way out of the despair that she was slipping into. We don't have holidays to remember people like Abigail. But we do have organizations who do everything they can to help us remember and not forget the hurting and needy in our world. But what do we do when they remind us? Are you like me when the mail comes in your mailbox from somebody warning us about the tornado season and how we can help in Jesus' name? Or with pictures like these. It says, "Their lives are in your hands," from ADRA. Are you like me? Does it go in the recycle bin? Or from World Vision, "Urgent, open immediately. Massive earthquake slams Nepal," unopened and in the recycle bin. Are you like me? When the email comes to your inbox, do you hit the delete key faster than when you see the 5th Kohl's sale reminder of the day? When you see the news stories, do you turn off your emotions unless it's someone you know or close to someone you know? The reminders about the forgotten are everywhere, but so are our excuses. Do you think, well, I've already given my 10% already? Or maybe, I can't even save for my kids' college. Or don't I deserve a vacation? Maybe you're a teenager and you think, well, I really don't make much, so you can't expect me to give. I need to save for a car or go to prom, or I just want to go out to eat with my friends for lunch. Or maybe you're only in elementary school and you hear about these needs at school and at church and on the news, and you think you're too small to do anything. So most of the time, we choose to forget about these needs. We've heard it all before. We go on with our very busy lives, forgetting about those people who are different from us and live far from us and have much less than we do. But what should we do? When we see startling statistics like these, or hear horrific stories like Abigail, who was sold into the sex trade, what are we as Christians to do? I certainly don't have all the answers. I just told you I usually throw many of those reminders in the recycle bin. But if you're here today, odds are you're either a Christian or you want to know what those people who call them Christians believe. So let's see what Jesus has to say about remembering the forgotten. One of the most commonly quoted verses about remembering the forgotten comes from Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. It says, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." If you highlight or underline in your Bible, odds are this verse is marked. So what does it mean? Who are these least of these, and why should we be doing something for them? So if you'll turn with me in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. As a little bit of context here, in my Bible, these verses are in red, which means that Jesus spoke them, which means that we should pay attention as Christ followers. They are important. And Jesus had been speaking for a long time. The 5 previous pages in my Bible are full of red words. Jesus is saying a lot, all at once. And he's probably making sure it all gets said before he is crucified, the events of which spring into action just after these verses that we're going to look at. This is a crucial time. Jesus' time on earth is running short, and he is saying crucial things. These verses are just after Matthew chapter 24, the famous chapter about Jesus' second coming. Previously in the same chapter, Jesus tells 2 other parables about judgment, about being ready for the second coming, preparing now for what will happen in the future. This parable that starts in verse 31 is a continuation on this theme. What does Jesus expect of us now, and what will happen when he returns? And Jesus loved to talk in parables, and some of you may be wondering, what is a parable, and what are we supposed to do with them? Well, a parable is just a story. It's usually used to compare 2 or more things and to give a lesson. It's important to know that parables have a point. They teach us something about God and his kingdom. And Jesus, when he spoke in parables, he used images and characters from everyday life to make his message clear. Because who doesn't love a good story, right? The parable of the sheep and goats is no exception. It's a great story, and many people in Jesus' day either owned or took care of sheep and goats. So let's read through the whole thing, and then we'll kind of break it down afterwards. starting in Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. There we go. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people, one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in? Or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They will also answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you?" He will reply, "I tell you the truth. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. It's quite a bit to take in all at once. And if you take it at first glance, it kind of seems like you want to be a sheep, and if you want to be a sheep, then you should give people food, water, clothing, and take care of those who are sick or in prison. But as we dig into this, I think we're going to see something different. That's not quite what it means, at least maybe not in that order. So let's try and put ourselves right into this story. Let's put ourselves into the parable and imagine Christ coming back in all his glory. It will be the most amazing and beautiful sight we have ever seen. It will command everyone's attention because it has never happened before. All the people will be right there, and the people, it says, will be separated into two groups, like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And some of us are probably thinking, because I don't know about you, but in today's world, not too many of us have opportunities to be with sheep and goats. So what did it mean by that? Well, typically, a shepherd in Palestine allowed sheep and goats to mingle together during the day. But at night, the shepherd would call the sheep with this unique sound, and the sheep would listen to the shepherd. They would come with him. Sheep are gentle and quiet, easily led animals. Goats, on the other hand, are pushy, self-sufficient, and headstrong. Goats are naturally quarrelsome and have short tempers. So goats are not herded as well as sheep because they would rather lead than follow. So as we understand more about the sheep and the goats, we can see they may have a few similarities, but they really are quite different. And I don't know about you, but it seems like the sheep are nicer animals. So we have the sheep, those who follow the shepherd on the right, and the goats, those who do not follow anyone but themselves on the left. So let's go back to verse 34, which holds a wonderful promise. Those on the right are told to take their inheritance, which is the kingdom that has been prepared since the creation of the world. There's two important things to note here, and the first is that this reward is an inheritance. It's not something earned, but it's something given as a gift by the Father. No one earns their inheritance. It's a gift made out of love. The second thing to note is that this beautiful, awesome kingdom that awaits those on the right has been around for a long time, since the creation of the world. It's not something earned where God said, oh, you did this great thing, so now I will make this great place for you. No, the great place was made long ago to be given as a gift. To who? The verse says, those who are blessed by my Father. And other versions use the words of my Father. And here, that word of would mean who belong to my Father. Kind of like we might say, Newday Church of Parker. The church belongs to Parker. So I'll bet you're like me. I bet you're thinking, I want to be on the right. I want to receive this ultimate inheritance from our Heavenly Father. And the good news is that I don't have to earn it. It's an inheritance that's ready to be given to us if we belong to God's family. So then, what about the next verses? Why do they seem to say that we need to do good for others in order to earn this gift? And the next verses are clear in one way. The sheep definitely are helping those in need. This is how they are remembering the forgotten. They are providing basic needs for people who are usually left out or forgotten. However, they aren't doing it to earn this inheritance. The inheritance is already there to be given as a gift. Instead, they are doing it because they are sheep. Sheep who have the desire in their hearts to follow their shepherd. Time and time again in the New Testament, we see the shepherd, Jesus, demonstrate this pattern. See a need, have compassion, and act. In Luke chapter 7, Jesus sees a woman crying over her son's death. He has compassion on her and brings her son back to life. In Matthew chapters 9, 14, and 15, and again in Mark chapters 6 and 8, Jesus saw crowds of people with needs. He had compassion and he did miracles. He healed their sicknesses and disabilities. He fed them by the thousands. And of course, he told them about this awaiting inheritance for those who choose to belong to God's kingdom. This is what the sheep did in verses 35 and 36 as well. They did just like their shepherd. They saw a need, whether it was hunger, or thirst, or nakedness, or sickness, or imprisonment. They had compassion, and they acted. As Christians, we are called to remember the forgotten by helping those in need. We are called to act like our shepherd, not so we will earn the blessing, but because we already are so blessed. When we understand how much Christ gave up and gave to us, we have no problem giving to others. We follow our shepherd's lead, and we do these things because they are evidence of God's grace within us. In verses 37 through 39, the sheep are shocked that Jesus is saying that they did these things for him. These things were such a regular part of their lives that they didn't understand. So in verse 40, Jesus clarifies by saying that any time help is given to one of the least of these brothers of his, it's like you did it for Jesus. Which is so cool. It's an amazing way to think about when we help others. It's really like we are helping Jesus. And some will put an argument here, saying that because Jesus used the words brothers and sisters, that he's only talking about other Christians. And I would say that this verse is pretty clear. It's saying, help your brothers. And that probably does mean Christians. But what it's not saying is that we shouldn't help others who are not Christians, because that doesn't line up with what else we see in the Bible. After all, Acts 20:35 tells us it's more blessed to give than to receive. And James 1:27 reminds us that religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to remember and look after orphans and widows in their distress. And another one, Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, doesn't tell us how to act if we give to the needy. It tells us that when you give to the needy, not to do it with fanfare. And in Romans 12, we are told to do all these kind things for our enemies. So hopefully these few verses are enough to show that we should help both Christians and non-Christians in need. Then we have the goats. And guess what? They are shocked too. They can't believe they didn't help Jesus when they saw he was in need. Surely, if they had seen Jesus needing something, they would have provided it. But that's just it. They either didn't see the need, or they saw the need and didn't act. They didn't remember those who were so easily forgotten. Instead, they overlooked them. They lived their own lives, much like actual goats do. They weren't following a shepherd. They were just going their own way and looking out for themselves, not others. And this is like many people in our world. As Richard Stearns, president of World Vision US, says, these verses could be rewritten this way. For I was hungry while you had all you needed. I was thirsty, but you drank bottled water. I was a stranger and you wanted me deported. I needed clothes, but you needed more clothes. I was sick, and you pointed out the behaviors that led to my sickness. I was in prison, and you said I was getting what I deserved. If we're honest, our response to the poor might sometimes be better described by these words. But we don't have to suffer the fate of the goats, eternal separation from God. I'm here speaking to you today to be a reminder. We don't have holidays, but we do come here to be reminded of things. I believe it's what God wanted me to tell you today, that we as Christians are called to remember the forgotten by helping those in need. It's not enough to see the need and have compassion. We have to act too. And it's not enough just to act at Christmas time. People are hurting and in need all year long. If we are true sheep, following our shepherd all the time, then helping others becomes part of who we are. So what should we do? The problems are big and we feel so small. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything. It means the opposite. That when we see a need, we need to have compassion and we need to act. We act because God is working inside of us. We act with the tools and gifts God has given us, no matter how big or small they are. And it's important to remember that when we sacrifice, even if it's a small thing, it will make a difference. So how do we do it? I want to give you a few ideas and hope that as individuals and families, you'll take one or maybe even all of them and implement them so that you can remember the forgotten by helping those in need. And the first thing is to be ready to act when you hear about a need. Keep some funds set aside so that you can act. Maybe you don't have any funds, you're telling yourself, to set aside. So for those of you who are in that situation, I would just ask that you consider making a sacrifice of something that the rest of the world might find a luxury, which we consider everyday things. And some ideas include eating out, or having coffee, or energy drinks, or soda, or maybe even cable television. And for those of you who are teenagers or working adults, if you're like many of people I know, you probably eat out almost every day for lunch during the week. And I would just ask that you might think of committing to something, making a sacrifice, maybe one day a week, or an entire week, or an entire month. You'll give up eating out for lunch. And you'll take that money that you saved, and you can provide so much through organizations like ADRA or World Vision. Just $25 right now on World Vision's site is multiplied to 100 for food for those who are hungry. Another great way to help is to consider giving a microloan. There's organizations such as World Vision Micro or Kiva that will take a donation of as little as $25 and match it with everybody else's money until a loan is funded. They give that to an entrepreneur in a developing country, and they're able to get the things that they need to provide for themselves and their families. Then, once the loan is repaid with Kiva, you can even ask for your money back, or you can transfer it to another loan. I know a family who is trying to follow the love and logic advice that when their kids are fighting, I don't know if any of you can relate, but when their kids are fighting, they are starting to charge them $1 a minute for every time their kids are fighting. And they plan to use that, it's a good idea. They plan to use that money to fund a loan, unless their kids figure it out too quickly. But another idea is to host a garage sale for charity. Here, you get to sacrifice your time and get rid of your junk for a good cause. It's a win-win. Our small group did this a couple of years ago, and in one Friday morning, we raised over $250 for International Justice Mission. And speaking of International Justice Mission, if the issue of slavery is important to you, then I would encourage you to become a Freedom Partner at IJM. For just $24 a month, you can help IJM be there 24 hours a day for people who are facing issues of slavery, sex trafficking, and other violent crimes. The best $24 you'll probably spend this month. And for kids, don't think that I've forgotten about you. I want you to consider a true sacrifice at your next birthday party. Instead of asking your friends to bring you more things that your mom's just going to tell you to pick up and put away, then I would ask for you to think of your friends to support a specific cause. One idea is to bring gifts for Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes. Those can be toys or school supplies or hygiene items. And another idea comes from our very own Annika Severin, who works as a nurse at the NICU at Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital. They accept gifts of those fleece tie blankets for the babies. They look like this. And they put them over the isolette. These are tiny babies who are struggling to live each and every day. And these gifts that are given to their family may be the only thing that they have for the baby, because many times these babies have come so early, they haven't even bought anything for them. So a great way at your birthday party would be to have your friends either bring a blanket already made, or to bring the fleece, and then you guys could make them together. That would be so much fun. So maybe these things seem really big to you, and I just encourage you to dig deep and to look around and see if you could do one of them. Or maybe they seem small to you, and I would encourage you to do all of them and maybe add a few zeros to the ends of some of those numbers. Let's just listen to all the reminders that are around us about those who are hurting and in need. Let's see the need, have compassion, and act. And still, if some of you are still thinking, what I have to give is so little, it can't help, then I want you to watch this video to see an example of what it looks like to remember the forgotten by helping those in need.
So I regularly try to take my little 5-year-old daughter out on daddy-daughter dates, and we go do all kinds of stuff. There was this one particular Saturday where she said, Dad, I think today for our date, I would like to go collect bug shells. She shows me this little cicada bug shell that's sure enough sitting on the side of the tree, and she says to me, Dad, my friend Adele and I would like to start a business collecting bug shells. I smiled and I said, okay, what are you going to do with the money that you make? And she said, well, we're going to buy people water with the money. There are kids in Africa who don't have clean drinking water, and we want to help get them water. I felt about that small, thinking she was just buying water for our neighbors. And so she goes and she tells my wife the same idea. My wife finally adjusts her business model and says, well, maybe instead of bug shells, you'd be able to ask people for pop cans and money. And so they start going door to door. She and her friend, they divide up the sales pitch. One of them says, we're collecting money and pop cans. And the other one says, for kids in Africa to have clean drinking water. And so they go house to house. They interact with all of these different neighbors. And eventually they raised $67.60. And I walk into our kitchen and they're sitting there lining up all the nickels and quarters and all the different pop cans, and they say, let's send it to World Vision's water team and we'll write them a letter. And so they write this letter to World Vision's water team, and they put the $67.60 into an envelope and send it off. We got a letter back from World Vision, and it's this organization that receives donations from all over the place. And in the letter, you could just tell how inspired they were by just this 5 and 7-year-old girl, just doing the kid thing, living it day in and day out. And this particular day, this is just what they decided to do. Was let's go help somebody have some clean drinking water. The day after they did all of this, my daughter walked up to me and she said, "Dad, do you think I helped save somebody's life yesterday?" And it was so cool to be able to say to her, "Yeah, I think you probably did."
Like if we all followed our shepherd. If we all remember that as Christians, we are called to remember the forgotten by helping those in need. It would be a different place. It would be a place where God's kingdom is being exhibited on earth. It would be a place, I believe, where Jesus will be coming soon. It would be a place of less suffering, more compassion, and more action. It would be a place of less people being hungry, thirsty, or enslaved. Remember Abigail? Because Christians are remembering to help those in need, Abigail was rescued. As the Greek police conducted a raid and arrested the men who had purchased her, she thought it had to be a dream. But as she walked out of that dark room into the light, she knew it was real. Since that day, Abigail has been under the care of a shelter in Greece, funded by donations from Christians like you and me. Although she endured unspeakable pain, she also is discovering that she isn't alone, and somehow her story can turn into something beautiful. Day by day, she's discovering restoration and peace. Abigail is finding that she has a future, and it's more beautiful and bright than she ever could have imagined. That's the kind of world we can have when we remember the forgotten by helping them move. It's a world where this recycle bin becomes the ways to help others spin.